Hello, this is Gavin Phillips with LayerCake, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to use all of the different elements within these picture windows. During the course of this tutorial, we'll be touching on the LayerCake Studio Magic panel, which enables you to cut anybody out of any photograph, put on a shadow, and paint with light. Now the Studio Magic panel, once you've installed it, would be located under Window, Extensions, Studio Magic, and because it is a Photoshop panel, it can be docked with any other of the Photoshop panels. As I've done it here, I've docked it with the layers, so you can drag it out from any existing panels, or you can drag it in and dock it with any of them to make it more convenient for you. Now you'll be receiving in-depth tutorials on every facet of the Studio Magic panel, how to cut anybody out of any image, how to use all of the selection tools, many tutorials that go into a lot of depth on all those areas. We will be touching on some parts of it here, but what we're going to focus on is how to use and work with the picture windows. Now you can purchase the picture windows separately from the Studio Magic panel if you choose to, or you can purchase them together, but they are offered for sale separately as well. Now before we get into all the specifics of working with the different layers and everything in the picture windows, there's something I'd like to draw your attention to, and that's how to turn off tabbing in Photoshop. Tabbing refers to when you open up a number of images or photos in Photoshop and they're all tabbed along the top. So a lot of them are hidden, and a lot of users have mentioned to us that it's not their preferred way to work in Photoshop. Now the way to turn it off, and you can always turn it back on if you want to, is under Edit, Preferences, and this also might help you to customize your workspace to suit the way that you work. You go to Interface, and then right under here you uncheck Open Documents as tabs. Now you can always go back in and check that again at any time. I'm going to click OK. So let's turn our attention to working with the picture windows. The first thing I want to point out is you're going to see a lot of these groups inside the layers palette, and you've got a little arrow here. If you click on the arrow, it's going to open up, and sometimes you might find other groups in here. This is in order to keep the layers organized, and as you can see, once I click on that little arrow and open it up, a number of other layers are in here, and there's another folder in here for the street lamp. So if I click on that one, we can open that up and see what's inside there. And we can see that inside each of these groups are different layers that we can turn on and off. This is the street lamp. They're all named for us. We can see if you turn that off, it's going to get rid of it. I'm just going to collapse this one. What we can also see here is that a number of these layers are color-coded. Now you won't necessarily see these color-coded layers in every single window set. What you will see in every single one is the red one. This is the most important one, and this is the layer that you would select in order to drag and drop your subject in so that it would go above this red colored layer. So in every case you would simply turn this layer off, make sure it's selected, drag and drop in your person, and it will be in exactly the right place inside the layers palette. And you receive a PDF that explains exactly what those different color icons represent. As I mentioned, the red one is the most important. That's where you're going to drag your subject in, so it goes right above that red colored layer, so you can see all of that. So let's minimize that. Now when working with the different elements inside your picture windows, a lot of the time you'll be working with the move tool to move things around, especially the person that you've cut out, dragged and dropped in. The shortcut for the move tool is V on your keyboard. Now there are three ways to work with the move tool. The way that we recommend for the most part is to leave the auto select off and select the layer that you want to move around. So for instance, I've selected her. Now when I go in here and click inside, I can drag her around inside the image to place her exactly where I want. I'm going to press Ctrl or Command Z to put her back. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard. If you hold down the Shift key, you can move her around in 10 pixel increments. I'm going to back up out of there. The main difference between having auto select turned on or off, you're going to see in a moment here. If I select auto select and I click on any part of the image, it automatically will jump to that particular layer, and that is a useful way to work in some instances. The problem is that sometimes when you're clicking if I want to select her, for instance, you see what it's done is selected the rainy glass, and I didn't want the rainy glass. So we recommend for the most part leaving this unselected and just click on the layer that you want to move around, and then you can go in there and move them wherever you want to. Back out of that one. If I wanted to move the tree, I just select the tree, and then you can click anywhere in here and it's going to move the tree. You don't have to go right over by the tree. I'm going to Control or Command Z. Now there is another sub-menu under here. When the auto select is selected, we already showed you when you click on a layer it will pop up that layer. You can also select group if you want to, and when I click on an area it will show me exactly what group that's in. But as I mentioned, you want to leave this unchecked for the most part and just select the layer that you want to move around. Now you will also have noticed that some of these layers are locked, for instance this window layer, and the reason for that is so you don't accidentally move the whole window area around, and you probably would never need to unlock it. If you ever do want to unlock it, just select it and then click on the little padlock here. That will unlock it for you, but for the most part you want to keep that locked. Now if we scroll up to the top of the layers palette, we'll see that there's a light brush layer here, and this has already been added, and on many of the picture windows this light brush layer is already added. And you can add your own to any of the picture windows by using the Studio Magic panel. It's under the light brush tab here and paint with light. If you do add one to any of the picture windows, it will add it at the top. The default location for it is at the top of the layers palette. If you have any picture windows that have rain in them, you want to make certain that the rain layer is dragged above the light brush layer. And it's very simple to drag layers around. You just click, hold, and release it. So you can see the difference that makes. The rain definitely needs to be at the top here. So you just click, drag it, and then release, and it's at the top of the layers palette. Now you'll notice that many of these layers have layer masks on. If I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see we have layer masks on here as well. And that's to enable you to limit the amount of rain, in this case, that we have on the image. Now if you're unfamiliar with layer masks, they're very simple. We're just going to make sure that we've got a very simple default Photoshop soft brush. Now here's a shortcut that will help you out. If you right click inside the image, you can control and change the softness and the hardness of the brush very quickly. This is very soft and this would be very hard. We want something very soft. You can also change the size here, but there's a better shortcut for changing the size. If you use the brackets key, I can make the brush smaller or larger very quickly by just moving the brackets key. The other slider you want to look at is the opacity, and this will control how much of the rain that you remove with one swipe. So we might want to take it down to about 50%. To remove part of the rain, of course, on a white layer mask, we'll be painting with black. Now the way to change these colors back to their defaults of black and white is you press D on your keyboard, and that will switch them back to their defaults here. To switch them between black and white here, you press X on your keyboard. Press X again and it switches them again. You could also switch them by clicking here. So we've got black, we're painting with 50% opacity, and I can just paint through the image here. You see I can actually with 3 swipes remove all of the rain from the model here. So now if I wanted to paint the rain back in, I'd make sure that my opacity was 100%, switch back to white now, and we can see just with a couple of swipes here, look at the layer mask, we're completely back to the rain at 100%. Now you could also reduce the rain layer here by reducing the opacity of that layer, but the big difference is, of course, is reducing all of the rain on that layer by 50% instead of a certain area. So I'm going to put it back to 100%. Now another thing you could do here is you can duplicate any layer, of course. You might want more rain, so Control or Command J, and that's going to double up the rain. What we could do here is reduce the opacity maybe of the rain copy layer to maybe 50%. And then if you wanted to, you could go in here with our brush and X to switch it to black, and we could drop it maybe to about 50%, and paint away some of the rain there off of our model do it on the other layer here. So you've got total control there by just painting with black and white on the layer mask and changing the opacity. Now if we scroll down to the bottom here, you see you've got other choices of glass. You've got the rainy glass here. You could have the smoked glass. I think in this case the rainy glass works better. And if we select this and we go in here, and if we switch X to white, we can paint that back in. So you can see, painted that in at 100%, bring all of that rainy glass back in, and now we can see when we've got all of the rainy glass in there, we can switch X or switch here and drop the opacity maybe back to about 30%, somewhere in there. It's a good idea, I've found, to paint it back in lower amounts, the lower opacity, and then you can paint in more if you want to. So you can see you can just start bringing in her face here. Now I'll click in again, and you've got it exactly the way that you want it, but just painting on the layer mask. Let's scroll up the layers here and take a look at exactly how the shadow was made. I'm going to turn off the shadow. The shadow was made using the Studio Magic Shadow Caster. So I'm going to click on Shadow Caster, click on Create New Shadow, and it's going to create that shadow for us here. What I'm going to do now is just move it across, and we're going to make some changes to it here. So I'm going to drop the intensity of it down to about around 60, somewhere in there. We're going to change the height of it. First I'll drop the slant it the right way here. I'm going to slant it up to somewhere virtually straight up. So you can see you've got total control here of exactly where the shadow goes, all of the different parameters for it. I'm going to put this height up to somewhere in that area, move it up a little bit more. Then we're going to make it softer here, make the softness more, and we're going to probably drop the intensity back a little bit more as well, make it a little bit softer. And now we can just grab that, move it across here, just drag it across. And what's great about this is it might make the height a little bit bigger. What you can do is, you see it just jumped up there. You could now save this if you wanted to as a new preset. Call it anything you wanted to, and there's a number of factory presets. We'll call it lamp 4. Click OK, and that would show up at the top of the presets here. You've got a number of factory presets, but we do have a dedicated movie tutorial that gets into everything about creating shadows with the Studio Magic Shadow Caster. And if we go back to the layers, we can see here is the newly created shadow. You can turn that on and off, and you can always go back to that and edit it in the Studio Magic panel. And now we're back in the layers, we can go to the light brush layer, and as I mentioned, to be able to edit it when it's locked like this, you just select the layer and click on the little padlock here. Now we can edit it, and we can paint on the layer mask just as we did before using black or white. So if I switch to white here, and I got my brush, make it bigger using the brackets key, go to 100% opacity, you could paint the light brush layer out, and that shows you what it looks like when it's completely painted out. And now we just switch, press X on your keyboard and switch back to black with about maybe start about 70%, and you can start painting back in that light wherever you want it. So you've got total control over exactly where the light goes in your picture windows. Let's minimize this one and bring up another one of your picture windows here. So we can see here, here's the red layer, place the subject here. I'm going to turn her back on, and to make her clearer, of course, we'll select the layer mask. We've got our brush, I'll drop it back here a little bit, maybe paint in with about 50% opacity, make the brush a bit smaller, and you can start painting her in, bring in as much as you want, of course. So now I'm going to show you something a little bit different. We're going to turn her off and bring up a different photo here and show you how to cut somebody out using the Studio Magic panel. I'm just going to pull her across to the middle here. Now we're going to cut her out using the Studio Magic panel. This is a very simple cutout, of course, and as I mentioned, there are many in-depth tutorials showing you how to do all kinds of cutouts with the panel. The first thing we're going to start with is making a quick selection here using the Magic Wand tool, and I'm going to zoom in a bit and drag it out here, and you'll see how this works. It's very simple. Let's zoom back a little bit, grab our Magic Wand, and you just start clicking in here to make the initial selection. I'm going to add to the selection. I'm going to zoom in to this area here in between her hands, and then zoom in a little bit more, grab it again and just select that part. Now we can zoom out. So we've got our selection, we're in the cutout tab here, and you can see there's a couple of ways to go. Like I said, there are a lot of tutorials that go into the detailed cutout. For this particular cutout, it's very simple. We're going to use the auto cutout. Now let's go to the layers here, and we can see that she's been completely removed. Now we're simply going to drag and drop her in to our set here, but we can do something a bit different. We'll put her on the outside instead of behind the window. So you just need to reposition her there, and you see she's perfectly set there. So sometimes it works where you can put them on the outside of the set instead of behind the window. Now if you wanted to, you could go to the light brush layer here, select the mask, and you could paint some more light onto your subject here. So you could just bring in, make her a little bit lighter. So you've got total control there, and of course as we scroll through the different layers here, you can turn or turn off anything that you want. So for instance, in the window boxes here, I can open those up. I could turn on and off these window boxes. You can scroll down here, we've got the tree here, you can turn on and off. So you've got total control there, and if we move up to the top, I can once again turn her off, and you can see how it works when we have the person behind the window as well. Let's close these out and bring up a different set here, show you some different ideas. Let's bring up one of the winter sets, move this across a little bit. So once again, with this particular set, we're showing you another way to use it. We've put the model on the outside of the window. You have another choice. You could put them on the inside of the window here, and you just drag them above this red layer here, and you've got total control once again of all of the snow and icicles. You can turn them off individually by opening up the group, or alternatively you could just turn the whole group off. Let's close this one out and take a look at another one here. Bring up the one with the graffiti wall. I'll position it up here. So now I'm going to show you exactly how to drag and drop somebody in behind the window. So they will go above this red layer here. So I'm going to turn that off and bring up the original photo here. Let's go and grab him. Position him up here. Now he's already been cut out using the Studio Magic panel. I'm going to drag him in, drop him, and there he is right above the red layer. And you just click and drag him around to position him exactly where you want him. And it's as easy as that. As long as you've selected this red layer here, it's going to go in exactly the right place for you. I'm going to minimize this image. So you see that's the way it would work. I'm going to just delete that one now. You just select this one and then you drag in your new person and he would come right above here. Now there is something else to mention. As well as the in-depth movie tutorials, you also receive an in-depth PDF written tutorial on the window sets. So if you prefer to read through the PDF, you can do that as well. So let's see how it works when you add the light brush layer with the Studio Magic panel. I'll turn this one off. Actually, we'll delete this one. And we'll go to the Studio Magic panel, and this is the way it works. You're going to go to the Light Brush tab, click on Paint with Light Brush, and when we go back to Layers here, you'll see that the default position for the light brush, it puts it at the top of the Layers palette. And as I mentioned previously, if you do have any of the window sets that have the rain layers in them, and you add a light brush layer, it will put it to the top, so you will have to drag that rain layer to the top of the layers palette. So let's go ahead and paint in some light here. Once again, you're just painting with black or white with a soft brush, and we've got our lights up here, so I'm going to move it up. Yeah, it's up to about 90% there, so make the brush a bit bigger. What you can do is you can click in here and then you can shift click. So you hold down the shift key and click, and it goes in a line there, or you can just click in here and paint it in manually, however you want to do it. So you've got total control there of exactly where the light goes in your picture window. And once again, if the light is a little bit too strong, you want to paint some of it away, you can switch colors by pressing X, drop the opacity back to about say 40%, 30-40%, and then you can paint some of the light away from certain areas, get it exactly the way that you want it. That wraps up this tutorial for working with the picture windows. As I mentioned, there are several other movie tutorials that go into great depth on all facets of the Studio Magic panel, so make sure you take a look at those. My name is Gavin Phillips. Thank you for watching and have a great day.